Mornings with Nadine Maloney on 783 ABC Alice Springs.
Despite some big-name Australian brands manufacturing sports merchandise, not a lot of it is actually made here in Australia, and often sports balls and other equipment are made in cramped sweatshop-like conditions. But there's one Australian sports line with a connection to Central Australia that's leading the way for improved conditions during the manufacture of sports goods. Jinta Sport takes its name from a Warlpiri word, and it's committed to fair trade. Nick Savaidis is the founder of Jinta Sport. Good morning, Nick.
Morning, Nadine and listeners.
Now, your story is quite an interesting one, as is this creation of the new sports line. But let's go back to the beginning. You're based in Melbourne now, but you've spent a number of years living at Yuendumu. What were you actually doing there?
In the early 90s, I was employed as an adult educator there by the Northern Territory Open College of TAFE. I was meant to be running literacy and numeracy programs, but with the support of the local school principal, I was actually spent a number of years setting up what's referred to these days as social enterprises. Businesses were actually owned by the community, so which were helping to create employment in the community. So
your time in the centre inspired you and an interest, I guess, in social justice issues, is that right?
Yeah, and basically it made me realise that business doesn't always have to be a negative. Kind of people perceive as business as being detrimental to the environment, to other human beings, to exploitation of workers, etc. But what we were doing at Yuendumu was giving people income. It was helping their self-esteem. It was giving them pride in what they were producing. And because they were community-owned enterprises, they were benefiting the wider community as well. And that really appealed to me. I thought, one day, I would like to create my own social enterprise. And after I left at Yuendumu, I came back to... you mentioned I worked at Yuendumu for a number of years. I came back to Melbourne and went back to teaching for a short while, and then had the confidence to create my own social enterprise, which is now eventuated in the launch of the Jinta Sport brand.
So why did you decide on a sport brand? What was it that connected you to sport?
I've been aware about the exploitation of workers, young and old. And the reality is that, as recently as 3 years ago, a major sports brand was actually caught using both child labour and child slavery in the production of their sports gear. And it's pretty well documented. And I kind of, as a soccer coach myself and as someone who's been passionate about sport for most of his life, it kind of made me sick knowing that there's always a chance of myself, my kids, or the people I was enjoying sport with, playing with sports gear potentially made by people young and old who'd been exploited. And I thought, why not create a brand that's a sports brand that actually stood for something else apart from just being a cool sports brand, actually one that actually created a positive change in the world.
We hear the term sweatshop. Is that how you would describe some of the workshops for the major sports line manufacturers?
Well, I've actually visited quite a few factories which produce balls for a variety of brands, and the conditions are pretty tough. They certainly wouldn't be acceptable in Australia. And child labour has been stamped out in countries like Pakistan, but it still continues in India, where a lot of sports balls for the Australian market are being produced, not just soccer balls, but even Aussie rule balls. Most of them are actually produced in India, and the region where they're being produced is ripe with child labour. Sweatshops exist around the world, and it's not just the sports industry, it's also the fashion industry which has been implicated.
I just wanted to ask you, you mentioned that you've travelled to some of these sweatshops, and what are the conditions like?
Overbearing. I just find it amazing that people can have to put up with these kind of conditions. We're talking about cramped conditions, and we're talking about working in very incredibly humid, hot conditions without any air conditioning. There are basic human rights that we expect in Australia, rights of workers, which are not being respected in developing countries. There is plenty of, I'm not sure whether people have actually seen videos or photos of sweatshops, but a picture tells 1,000 words, and there's plenty of photos around there which actually shows you the conditions that the people are working in. It's certainly stuff that you and I wouldn't tolerate, but because it's done overseas, we seem to ignore that fact.
Well, you've decided to set up a fair trade product, the Jinta Sport brand, and the Jinta Ball as part of the Jinta line. This is a Warlpiri word. What's the connection? What does it actually mean?
Okay, well, in the early 90s, I spent 5 years working at Yuendamu and spending a lot of time with the Warlpiri communities as far as Lajamanu. And I thought it'd be great to create a sports brand which actually had an Australian or a iconic Australian name to it. And I thought, well, why not pick a Warlpiri word? And I've maintained friendships with people at Yuendamu, and I asked a few people, what would be a good name to come up with, and someone suggested Jinta because it meant number one or winner in the Warlpiri language, and it was short, it was sweet, and it was to the point. It actually stood for something. So we thought, Jinta's the right word. We test marketed on quite a few people in Melbourne, and everyone seemed to like it.
And
the connection with the Yuendamu is also that we wanted to put something back into sports programs on Indigenous communities. So we've also raised money for the sports programs run by the Mount Theo program at Yuendamu. So in addition to kind of using a Warlpiri word, we're also putting money back into Warlpiri communities.
How do the people of Yuendamu feel about you using the word Jinta? Are they proud?
Well, we've spoken to people young and old. I know some elderly ladies that I've known for a long time who said that they were really kind of amazed to see a Warlpiri word on a sports ball, and then the young kids themselves, they're quite chuffed to be kicking balls with a Warlpiri word on it. But apart from the Jinta word, we also have the Thorny Devil as our logo, and it's also a metaphor for our company, which is basically, we might be small, but you don't want to step on us, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, right. Now, you mentioned there that some of the proceeds will be going to the Mount Theo program. Was that something that you set that up yourself?
Yeah. When I was working at Yuendamu, there was always a shortage of money for sports programs. Sports, I'm sure everyone knows, in Central Australia are pretty important in remote communities. There's not much else to do, and it's a kind of healthy activity. And I thought, rather than, I know people had to beg and chase money all the time, so I thought, why not make it easy for them? Just basically 5% of all our direct sales and 2.5% of all our wholesale sales go into funding the Mount Theo, the sports programs run by the Mount Theo program.
With these Jinta balls, what sort of balls are they? They're soccer balls?
They range from everything